what did inspire the book? You know, I think a lot of people would have expected a memoir, which it is, to focus a lot on your time as the critic at the New York Times, but that's actually a very small part of the book at the very end. Why did you choose to do so much of the beforehand?
Well, many other restaurant critics have written that other book. And as you said, I do get into that. The last quarter of the book is all about the life of a restaurant critic and the, you know, shenanigans and covert operations of a restaurant critic. But that's not material that's entirely fresh. You know, other restaurant critics have shared that. And so many other memoirs written by restaurant critics or food writers or just any sorts of journalists who've done a lot with food deal with the romance of eating. I wanted to deal with both the romance of eating and the comedy and melodrama of overeating, which is also a part of a lot of people's stories.
Okay. So the book, it focuses, or a lot of it is dedicated to your family, and you're growing up in New York in a very Italian-American focused family. Just that's most of the book, but for the audience at Zócalo, how did that experience shape the way you eat?
Well, you know, mine was an Italian-American immigrant family, and I think as with a lot of immigrant families, you know, coming to this country from poorer backgrounds, food takes on extra importance because food is a measure of your wealth. You know, food is how you show people your generosity and what you're able to provide, both for your children, for guests. And so in the extended Bruni family, there was always this superabundance of food because that was sort of the way we said to ourselves and to the world that we were doing well. And if you are someone who is prone to overeating, if you're someone who's born round like I was with an enormous appetite, having all of that food around all the time, you know, gave my appetite much too much room to wander.
Did you ever, while you were growing up or facing, you know, the overeating, did you ever ask yourself or wonder, why me? I mean, your brothers, you said in the book that your brothers, they didn't have the same kind of issues. Did you ever ask that question or think of blaming anybody in your family?
I wouldn't blame anybody. I mean, I was certainly frustrated in the same way like some of us wish we were born better looking or taller or shorter as the case may be. You know, I would frequently feel frustrated and think, why is it that I seem to have this hunger much more intense than my siblings do? Why do I seem to have so much trouble controlling it? I certainly knew that life would be easier otherwise because kids teased me about my weight. But you know, what is, and so I began the process of trying to adapt to that and control it. And in my case, it took me many decades to really figure out how to live with my hunger.
Nowadays, I feel like there is a real obsession with food in general. Why do you think that is now? There's a lot of food blogs are popping up. That's where I come from, food blog world. TV seems to become more and more obsessed with food programming, and chefs and writers like you are becoming celebrities. Do you think, how do you, or why do you think that is happening?
Well, you know, we're a wealthy country and we've been a wealthy country for a long time. So the number of people who can afford not just to feed themselves, but to think about what they're feeding themselves and to make what are sometimes expensive choices and distinctions about what they eat. I mean, that number of people has grown over time. I also just think for, you know, whatever reason it is, we're much more sophisticated than we used to be. There's consciousness of where our food's coming from. I mean, not just all the things you've mentioned, but, you know, you've got super celebrities like Michael Pollan now, who's become famous by kind of talking to us about the kind of chemical composition of our food. I think as we, you know, as we've tackled many of the basic problems of society, we can kind of get to the finer points of living, and food would be one of those finer points. And so we have people, you know, looking at the nutritional value of what we eat, the politics of what we eat, and then, you know, we have this new generation of gourmands coming along. I know 15 and 16-year-olds who watch Top Chef religiously and then want to go into the kitchen and do what they've seen on TV. You know, it's a totally different world in that regard in this country.
Since you've left the position as a critic, has your eating changed? Because the book The subtitle is The Secret History of a Full-Time Eater. Do you still consider yourself a full-time eater?
I was a full-time eater when I was 2 and 3. Full-time eater is a very flexible phrase. I mean, it definitely plays off the notion of being a professional eater or a restaurant critic. But I think I've been a full-time eater my whole life. Actually now, no, I'm not a full-time eater, but it's taken a lot of work not to be a full-time eater. I'm someone who, left to my own devices, would probably eat from, from dawn well past midnight, because I'm sort of a born glutton. But now that I'm not a restaurant critic, I'm not sitting in fine restaurants every night eating, 4 courses. But how I'm going to be eating night to night, I don't know, because it's still so recent. I just left that job very, very recently.
Right. Means you're traveling.
And
So
I'm
it's the mini bar.
traveling, talking about the book. And yeah, I've had a few snacks from the mini bar, that's for sure.
Just some quickies for you. One word, not to think too hard. What are 3 things you have in your refrigerator right now, if you can remember?
Sure. I usually have very little in my refrigerator. I have white wine, I have probably coffee, and I have, mayonnaise, among other condiments.
What kinds of things do you look forward to coming to LA food-wise?
You're in a city here where you've got everything. So, I mean, in recent trips to LA, I've eaten pizza at Mozza. I've eaten, kind of new wave Spanish tapas at Bazaar by Jose Andres. So, I don't think of LA as any one food. I think of it as a city like New York that can give you a broad diversity of foods.